Good afternoon, everybody. Nice to see you all again. Quite excited about this. I think it's a really important aspect of how the sector functions. As I said, the people we have today were filmed in the course of last year. They were filmed on their own, and I hope today that they'll be able to talk to each other and compare notes. Very pleased to introduce Becky Walker from Oxford City Council, Francis Swan from Cambridge HIA, Kevin Ayres from Norwich City Council, Neil Edwards from Bent Council, and I think Sharon hasn't quite made it, so I think you're going to have to cover for her, Neil. Before we kick off the discussion, I think it's only fair that I'll give you a glimpse of the sort of issues that we filmed last year. So I'm hoping that the tech works, and Daniel will queue up the first fragment of film, and we will then launch into a discussion.
It's the types of people that we are providing the service for, you know, the vulnerable sections of the community that we're providing the service for, and that keeps me going. I enjoy it. I enjoy helping people. I like to know that, you know, you've done something of value, that has a value to somebody's life. That is probably what keeps me going.
To be honest, the situations where you feel helpless was taken away quite a lot by getting rid of means testing. There were a lot of situations where people didn't pass the means test, but you knew they couldn't afford to do it themselves, and you had to sort of walk away, and that was frustrating back then.
Yeah, I don't know. Funny enough, when I was thinking about this interview as well, I was brought up with my dad constantly saying there's no such thing as can't do. And that's my ethos in life, actually, is, you know, it's how do we do it? I don't often go out to visit customers, if I'm honest, and just occasionally I do. And when I sit in a room with particularly a profoundly disabled child, or, you know, we had a case where there was a former roofer who fell from the roof and, you know, was completely disabled really from the neck downwards. That's kind of very humbling, really, and you remember what you're there for.
I did find that I really enjoyed working in a local government setting. My first role in the district council was as a client officer for an external HIA. The job at its core was making a difference to people's lives, and that became very appealing and was something that certainly developed. Being able to help people for a job is quite a unique thing, and that in itself for me brings quite a lot of job satisfaction.
Really what keeps me going, as I said, is just helping people and making a real difference. And I also really love new ideas and new projects. I couldn't do the same job every single day. You can say that with home improvement agencies, it's never the same. You're always coming in, meeting new people, and the people that we meet are just so interesting. Some of the things that they've done and done in their lives, interesting and exciting.
And it really struck us that everybody was saying similar things, coming from different backgrounds, being motivated by different things, but landing on the same spot. How did you find that, guys?
Easy enough talking about your experiences. I thought it was scary watching the video back.
Yeah, it's definitely the people that make the difference, though. I don't think you'd do this job if it wasn't for the people that we help, and that is the main driving force for everything that we do, really. But yeah, I agree, it's horrible watching yourself.
I'd echo that.
Definitely.
I was really struck by what Francis said about individual clients, that you individualise it as opposed to as a mass of vulnerable people. It's specific cases you remember.
People touch you, don't they? So you realise how fortunate you are.
People are different as well. Everybody you help is different, and they've all got different needs, and no one person you go and see is the same. They've all got different needs and different things that they want helping you with, and they've all got really interesting things that have happened to them in their lives, and everybody's different. You can't say one person's the same.
What struck me watching it, and conscious that I was on the videos, but just that real sense of it is about people, you know, that humanity. I hate the word humanity is overused a little bit, but actually everybody is different, and that focus on the people that you're there to serve, which really just shone across. You're all very different as leaders in the sector, but you're all doing it because you want to make that difference.
Hi Sharon, welcome.
Hello.
Welcome. Hello Sharon.
I'm really sorry.
No, that's fine. We were just reflecting on the reason why you all do it, and all of you come out with the same theme really, which is that you do it because you want to help people. Do you want to add to that, or do you, and despite different backgrounds, different skills, different motivations?
Yeah, so probably not much more to add. If everybody said the same thing, I would probably just be repeating it. And yeah, it is a desire to help people. I think you need to have that kind of personality, I suppose, to want to help in general. And I think that's probably a common thread that we all have anyway, is that desire to help people. You know, if you know something, you want to be able to pass it on, share that knowledge, or that sense of I suppose, achievement that you feel for just knowing that you've be able to pass some advice on or being able to help people. That is a rewarding part.
Neil, do you want to add anything?
No, just that it's obviously a very rewarding role that we all do, and that goes down throughout the teams. I think all of my surveyors, all of our admin staff, they all get the same thing out of what we do, and that makes it worthwhile for us. So.
Do they get it from you, or do they bring that with them?
They bring it. It's hard to avoid it. We celebrate it, so we do discuss our successes as well as our failures. Obviously, we do fail sometimes, and yeah, I think it's something we share amongst ourselves. So you know, that's how I can be confident that everybody is feeling the same thing.
I think that the service is in a good place. You know, we've got good relationships with the OTs. I think reputationally, you know, that's improved a great deal. You know, we do a lot of kind of social marketing now. Last week we've been out doing sort of leaflet drops to try and raise awareness of the service. Performance is much better. A third of people report a reduction in the care package. 95% saying it increases their independence. 95% of our customers are saying that it improved their health and well-being, and you know, a lot of people as well saying it reduced the risk of falls. So we're in a good place. Back in 2020, we got awarded a very nice South Cambs District Council Team of the Year award as well. It is about also measuring your complaint, kind of what went wrong. Whenever there's a big complaint, I will put that on the agenda and discuss it with the team, and actually meet with the individuals to say, you know, how might we have done that better? We have managed to keep our service very lean as well. So, you know, our fees are still down at 15% plus VAT, which, you know, when you look around, there's much higher fees. Making sure positive messages were going out as well about the agency. So, as you know, I set up all the social media now. So we've got our Facebook, our Instagram, our LinkedIn accounts and everything else.
Well, it's customer feedback. We do a feedback with every single customer, and we get generally about 97% who are sort of basically happy with what we're doing. We're pretty much target driven, so the surveyors will know. We know how well the surveyors are doing by what they're producing.
Really, just to add to what Neil said, really, it's just the satisfaction surveys are carried out. We are continuously looking at improving our service. We have a process for every aspect of the work that we do. Another good thing, I think, is that the team are involved in the writing of those processes. Yeah, so every officer has an input.
Well, I think it's the same, really. I've never really been into doing things just to tick a box. If you've made a service and you've made a good service, then it's making a real difference to people's lives. So it's not just there because somebody said you need to have X, Y, and Z, and right, I've done that now. I've ticked that box, I've set up that thing, but it actually does do what it's supposed to do. Then it should be able to do that. It should be reactive, it should be timely, it should be doing everything to help people.
Our story is quite easy to tell. Within a 3-year period, we helped double the amount of people for half the amount of time it took to help them with the same amount of resources. That's our story.
Kevin, you were the most cogent in that little excerpt, in the sense that you knew exactly how you wanted to frame your service in terms of the numbers. Having said that, you were knocked out of the park by Francis' grip on the numbers as he was going through it. Do you want to reflect on it?
For me, reflect. I mean, for me as a service manager, it's pretty straightforward. A big part of my role is to be able to demonstrate what we're getting for our money. We're directly appointed by a local authority, and members want to know what they're doing. So you need some handy facts and figures available, and it's an easy story to say, as I said in that meeting. I mean, yeah, you're absolutely spot on. Frances knocked me out the park with her grasp of her numbers, which is a bit depressing. So I'm going to have to go away and study a bit. But yeah, it's not that we're competitive. It's about knowing what we're doing and how effective it is in terms of delivery, and being able to say that we deliver our service in a speedy way is really what people want to hear, and that we're helping as many people as possible. So that kind of drives the narrative for me.
Francis, you were right on top of the numbers.
You know, I'd love to say they're still exactly the same stats as they were now, though, as they were then. Post-COVID, our performance is dipping a little, so I might not be quoting them so heavily in the future.
But it's interesting. It is interesting, even if they are dipping. Well, how do you use them? What is it you do with that overview?
I think really we just sort of look at the resources. Have we got people working in the right places? Are there any gaps, both in terms of community and our performance, that we need to improve and address? And, you know, later on in the video, I think we all talk a little bit about kind of service re-engineering. What changes do we need to make and what can we improve? I'm always dubious about 100% satisfaction. I think that's rarely true. We reported on that recently, and I thought, well, that's just because only so many people have responded to the survey, because I know I've dealt with complaints in the last year. So it is using it to continuously improve. Yeah.
Neil, funnily enough, you picked up on that satisfaction form and the possible holes in the data that those show.
Well, just to say that we found that people didn't return questionnaires unless they'd had a really bad service. So Sharon's team, they make a call to all of our customers 6 or 8 weeks after. So
they will do it. It's normally probably around about around about a month or so after.
Yeah,
So at least I suppose at least a month after, but they can call them like 2 months or 3 months. Yeah. That's really just about our service. So we are sort of like, just so that we know that we're delivering a good service. And yeah, I suppose a measure of that as well is not just whether or not the customer's satisfied, it's also how many complaints you receive, because, you know, yeah, having a high percentage of customers, what about the ones that aren't taking part in that questionnaire, you know, or in that survey? What about finding out, you know, if they're satisfied and whether or not you need to make improvements there? And I think it's if they make a complaint, but we also measure in general. We do have regular, like 1 to 2 meetings. So Neil and our head of service, we do look at stats for how many referrals we've received, how many completions we've carried out, time taken, you know, how long people are on the waiting list for, whether that time's reducing, how we can, you know, what we can do. Is there anything we can do to reduce that any further? Is there anything we can do to speed the process up any further? So we're constantly, and we're having, like, you know, our 1 to 2s every month. We have stats that are fed back at team meetings, so staff know, you know, how well they are doing. And there's also on our database, we do have a record of how many completions as well. So we've got individual surveyors' names on there. You could see numbers, how well you're doing as an individual. But then equally, if we have our smaller grants, we also have data there. So you're able to see at a glance how many are approved and how many are completed. So I think improvements are constant, aren't they? Looking at ways to improve the service is constant process. You go through, you should go through, you know, the world doesn't stand still, so we shouldn't.
They're monthly meetings as well, so I suppose our service is reviewed quite holistically once a month, and where we see any trends that are, you know, going the wrong way, then we do take action to reverse that where we can.
Yeah. It's interesting because having posited that your main driver is the people. Our second discussion has been largely about data. I wonder how much of your understanding is informed by the data as opposed to the conversation with your people.
Sorry, yeah, it's the volume. In Brent, we're doing 700, 800, 900 adaptations or people a year. And so we do have to keep an eye on the data, because otherwise it's just it will just be a sea of people. Generally, we basically look at data because that's the only way we can really manage the high volume of work that we do.
The data can tell you lots of things. So obviously we look at all our completions and timescales and how many people we've helped and things, but it can also tell you about the people that you haven't helped. And so that's really sort of helped us when we were looking at reviewing our RO policy to look at what people couldn't we help and could we put something in place to address those people. And you can also look at your statistics locally and see what are our statistics of people we're helping and what are statistics locally, and are we meeting the right type of people, and are there more that we can do to try and reach those people. And so data can be really, really useful, but each one is an individual person obviously, but data can tell you a lot of things within that.
Perhaps I could come in here, Francis, because I'm conscious I don't run an HIA. I'm just here as a invited guest, I think, this afternoon, but passionate about housing and like how housing fits into the bigger system. And I think data and numbers and measuring stuff and having financial projections, it's critical, isn't it? Because you have to actually, deliver. You've got to have business cases to be able to widen stuff. So I think there's something about what I'm getting the sense of is curiosity around the data. What is actually behind some of those numbers? Where are the people behind some of those numbers, and where are the people that aren't showing up in those numbers? Because I'm not a data-driven person, and I worked over at Blavey. You have to be able to do it, but actually it's not something that excited me necessarily. But if you want to win funding, do you want to, I suppose, have conversations in the wider system, they're going to know, they want to know how much money is it going to cost, how much money is it going to save me, how many people. So I think having that sense of data is critical, but I'm getting a sense the people behind the data is coming out here beautifully.
It is an interesting one, Sandra, because and Sharon already alluded to it, which is the data then starts driving what improvements you make, what changes you make. And Dan, I believe we have a little segments queued up for that particular part of the film.
I would just add that happy customers doesn't necessarily mean you're giving them a good service. People have a low expectation of council services, and they will put up with unbelievably bad service. So you have to be looking beyond that, otherwise you don't really get an honest picture.
That's very honest of you, Neil. It's an honesty worthy of a leader.
Personally, I'm a great believer that you make your biggest improvements by making mistakes, looking at what doesn't work and saying, okay, that didn't work. Let's make change. Let's improve things really.
When I started in construction, my manager, he was a managing director of a company, and he spoke to me about efficiencies. And one of the things that he always spoke about was Toyota. They have a graduate trainee scheme. What they do for the first 3 months of their placement when they start with the organisation is they look at the production line. They focus on one area of a production line and they look at it and try and bring about an efficiency to the production line. Now, it could be an efficiency that shaves 5 minutes off a production time, or it could be 5 seconds. But over time, each year, that brings down their operational costs. And that's something that's always stuck with me. And I've taken the very same approach with our delivery.
Well, I definitely don't think you should have a big bang. So you start off with your service, but then you look to improve it. So it's not completely stopping everything and saying, right, we're going to chuck everything away and start right from scratch. Just looking at the things that you've got now, seeing how they can be improved and making little changes or even big changes, making sure that the things that you've got still continue because they're what people need, and then improving it and improving it and refining it.
Something that I suppose there's a foundation there that you're building on, or it's starting from, so it's always, constantly looking at ways to improve. I believe that we should always be looking at ways to improve a service or improve anything that we do. It can always be done better.
I'm going to be
revolution.
Yeah, so as I say, it's okay because it all comes out in the middle somewhere. So yeah, no, I do just go for stuff. So yeah, revolution would be me.
Sorry, Sharon, I was on mute. Sharon, you already led into this conversation, and I'm interested in you saying you're constantly evolving and taking on the next platform. I suppose the simple question to kick this off between the five of you is what are you working on at the moment? What are you evolving at the moment? What do you think could be better in your service? And maybe share that with some of the others.
We've been looking at timescales because we've got quite low timescales already, but obviously with the new guidance coming out, we've just been having a look at it as a team. So it's not me coming up with the idea and saying, right, we're going to start doing this. It's going back to the team and saying, right, we've got good timescales, but we want to get them down even lower. What can we do to make things faster and more efficient? And that's something we're looking at the moment. And also, as I said, trying to get to some of the people, not the hard to reach people, but the people that we've failed to reach. So those sort of people.
Kevin, strikes me that relates to your marginal gains piece. So where are the marginal gains for you at the moment?
It's COVID recovery, as Francis alluded to. So yeah, it's trying to get back to where we were pre-COVID, but it's also, and this will probably be reflective amongst a lot of us, we're in a new world now. Integrated care boards are here, and that's changing what we do and what we are quite rapidly. So there's the day job, DFG day job kind of thing. It kind of feels like been there, completed DFGs, and it's onto the new world of integrated care boards, notwithstanding that there's some post-COVID lag that we need to clear up, but that will come with time. Yeah, so it's not so much about efficiencies or improvements, but a greater sense of integrating housing into the wider system, the health and social care picture.
Yeah, I suppose it's a salutary lesson that not all change is driven by your own improvement plans. Francis?
Well, I was going to add, actually, sort of developing our IT is a major area we're working on at the moment, looking at sort of integration with other systems, mobile working, use of GIS, and being able to plot and map where our customer base is so we can target areas we're not reaching. And linked to that, we're doing a lot of work on kind of marketing in a particular district at the moment where we think take up is much lower than it should be, similar to what Becky said just a moment ago, and continue to develop our trusted assessor model. We had to withdraw from that in the short term just to make sure that we've got the revenue in that we needed from disabled facilities grants, but keen to restart that and backfill in a post to enable that.
Sharon, having challenged you to start, you can now end it.
So continuous, I mean, to be honest with you, it's not something that we have looked or discussed in any great detail. I mean, things in Brent, you know, we're always inundated with a number of referrals, so we're not necessarily out there looking, I suppose, for more business. The referrals come into us, although that said, we do accept referrals, and we have changed things so that we're not only accepting referrals from one source. So the fact that other healthcare professionals can refer in, then that's good. I think one of the concerns, I suppose, that with our new offering of disabled adaptation grants, we've used the RRO to sort of like to remove means testing. So that's something we constantly have to keep a close eye on to see, well, you know, has that had an impact on the numbers of people, you know, that are applying for a grant? Has that pushed that number up? And at one point we thought, yes, it had. Like your other contributors, you know, we are in recovery of COVID. We weren't that affected in private housing services. We were quite lucky that, you know, we probably had about a month or so, or 6 weeks, and then we found ways to work to get the adaptations done, because we realised that, you know, people are still going to want to have adaptations. We still need to develop to deliver a service. We gave people the option of, you know, putting things on hold, but then, you know, for the most part, it was business as usual. We just found a different way to be able to deliver. And I suppose as we come out of this COVID, although it's still here, one of the other concerns, or things that we would always be constantly keeping an eye on, is, you know, will the number of referrals increase? We know that there are backlogs within social care, carrying out assessments, and we know that they're coming, but is that going to have an impact on you know, the numbers of referrals that we receive. Are we still going to be able to deliver the same service? You know, we've managed to reduce our waiting list over the last year or so. You know, we've gone from several months to about 2 months now waiting. So we've managed to really drive that down, and we're just hoping we can maintain it, but nothing stays the same forever. So you just have to be constantly aware. I think you just really need to be aware of these changes and make sure that, you know, you don't take your eye off the ball.
It's a really interesting point you make about actually reviewing the improvements you made, going back rather than constantly going forward. So I saw you nodding, Francis. Did you want to add? Or
no, I was just agreeing. That was all.
Thank you. Dan, will you cue up the next fragment, which I believe is around teamwork and the realization that none of you do this on your own. So.
Little bureaucracy as possible, sort of leadership that allows you to kind of get on with the job, as well as critical, you know, not micromanaging, the right amount of balance between demand and budget, as I mentioned as well. That's really good. OTs who kind of want to change and work with you. I mean, we went down the trusted assessor route, adaptations without delay. Let's look at who else can do some of these short simples. So we jumped on that bandwagon quite quickly and got our staff trained and are now working through how we're going to deliver that, particularly in light of large waiting lists with the OT service.
I think the biggest one is probably my boss, Ian Wright. He's the head of our service, and he's always been really supportive. So when I first started, he said, you know, this is the regulatory reform order, it's out of date, go ahead and make the changes. And he's always been really supportive and let me do all the changes that I wanted to do. And if you haven't got that support, and the council as well has always been really supportive of the changes I wanted to make. And without that support, then you can't make those changes. So that's been really useful. And then, as I said before, I think you just need a really good team, because you can't run a service just on one person. People are really good at doing particular tasks, and using them in the right way makes for a really good team.
I'd really like to impress that I've been exceptionally lucky with the team that I've inherited, and I've got a great set of colleagues around me, and I'm forever thankful and proud to work along the people that I work with. They are brilliant, and I'm really lucky in that regard.
I have to say, in terms of my life, it'd be my wife, but in terms of here, it's my head of service. He's so supportive and so he's very inspirational, and we couldn't have done any of this without Spencer, really, could we? So.
Okay, well, I don't have a wife, so I think the team. So yes, of course, our head of service, because that's where, you know, I think the leadership starts from the top. But the team, really, you know, they do the job so well. They work really well together. They communicate well with customers. You know, they just do the job exceptionally well. I mean, honestly, I just returned from leave and I didn't even have a minute's worry when I was off.
So I think that's one of the sweetest sections of the whole film, actually, and that's partly because you're also really conscious about teams up and teams down, and that actually you're surrounded by a support structure that really works for you. Now, you know, we've all been in places where that doesn't always function, but I was really struck by how that worked for you in this place at the moment. Does anybody want to share or expand on that?
Francis, can I come in on that, because it's smiling, lots of real recognition of the impact of your leaders, but actually you guys make that happen, because actually without those individuals getting a sense of actually the impact and potential of where housing interventions can actually make a difference, they're not going to be out leading that charge for you. So I would just encourage you to recognize that you're part of that. And sometimes our bosses aren't as great as we would want them to be, but you will have made them and helped them stay in that space. And then that infiltrates down, doesn't it? I'm getting a real sense of energy around you doing this to make a difference to people's lives, but also to the way their confidence and actually that can become quite infectious in terms of up and down and around. So it
Yeah,
was
no,
lovely to watch that.
so I was hoping that you might be able to discuss, what it feels like within that team's work. Sharon was very voluble about it, saying, "I don't have any worries about there being a to-do list when I come back from holiday." And I wish my life was that simple. But
I think really, so I can only speak about the team that I manage now, but I'm probably just like an overseer. So what helps, I suppose, is that everyone knows what their role is. So I think to be able to train or to deliver the proper training to enable somebody to give their job, give them the tools that they need to be able to do their job well. So everyone in my team were involved in the process, writing the process of the job that they do. If you're involved in it and you're going to understand it more, you're going to be more sort of like engaged in it, aren't you? You're going to be more invested in doing that job well because you're part of that process. And we do have like a support team, I suppose. I don't like to call them like an admin because I always say they do far more than that, far more. But they really have. So we do, they work as a small team together. That's one aspect of it. They have a weekly rota where they all have their responsibilities within that week, so week 1, 2, and 3. And they work well together to make sure that they've completed their tasks that week. Or if somebody needs a bit of help, they will just help each other or say, look, guys, I need a bit of help. They work well together. They communicate well. They offer support for all of the grants teams and Neil's guys as well. And they really, really do work hard and work well. And I said to them recently that, basically you manage your workload in that week. You're not coming to me. So just giving them that ownership. So this is your responsibility for the week. How you do it within that week is up to you. It's quite empowering. And I think they do feel quite empowered because they're not having to report. And also they can be more responsible. I think if you've got officers that are aware of what they're meant to be doing and they feel that sense of responsibility, they will go ahead and they'll do it, and they'll do it to the best of their ability. And they do. So maybe it's just luck, I don't know. We're lucky to have a really good team, but none of it could happen without each and every one of them. None of it. We couldn't deliver the service we deliver without them at all. We just couldn't.
I'm really lucky. I've got a brilliant team, but also I'd add to that they all support each other. So because we get together and do team planning about what we're going to do and what our goals are really, they could all support each other. So it could be that if one of them's got a problem, they go to each other. So they don't necessarily come to me, they support each other. And they're really, really, they're just brilliant. We couldn't do without them really.
I think on the subject of supporting each other as well, I would add it's that all the other great HIA managers around us. When I came into post, I was lucky enough to spend some time in Peterborough with Finland. Kevin, I remember going over and having a chat with Kevin as well, with colleagues from Hertfordshire, and just learning from other people, particularly if you're new to the world of DFG. I can remember asking very silly questions, what does that mean? And those people kind of supported and guided you. And now when there are problems up, you throw them an email saying, how's this with you? And it's quite consolidating and reassuring as well.
Kevin, you were probably the most fulsome in your praise of your team in that clip. The one word that struck me about that is that you inherited a team. Does that mean you don't take any responsibility for shaping it?
Oh no, I take responsibility for shaping it. No, I do. No, I inherited a lot of the team, but definitely, I'm still shaping the service. I'm still molding it to how I want it to work and what I want it to be. So it's a two-way thing. I do own what I do, but I think my job is to let people get on with it. They know, I can't remember who said it. It was Becky, I think, or maybe Sharon said, make sure people are clear on what they're doing and leave them to it. That's what's clear is that people need to know what they're doing, and they've got a clear understanding of their roles. Get off and do it, please, to your best of your ability. I'm here when you need me, but otherwise you won't see me too much, and I'll just leave you to it. So I think that's it. It's kind of knowing when to swap between sort of mentor and manager, and knowing when to step in and when to step away, and knowing when to answer questions and knowing when to empower people to answer their own questions. And that's the one that I really struggle with. The latter is sometimes it's too easy to answer a question, and you're probably doing yourself a disservice by doing it. And it's much better to get people to think for themselves, and you know, most people will have the solution, and will have the best solution. So it's about empowering your colleagues and your staff to find the way through it, but being that critical voice for them.
I agree with Francis as well, that coming to the conferences and that hearing other managers, not necessarily doing presentations, but even in the lunch break, just explaining what they're doing in their service, and you think, oh, that's a brilliant idea, I could do that. And then you can ask all the sort of questions like, how did you do it, and what problems did you have? And it's really, really useful to pick up those sort of ideas from people.
Yeah, if there's one thing I'm delighted about, is the fact that I got all five of you talking together. It really does work. We should probably mainstream it. The last clip of the film, Dan, do you want to cue it up?
I really pride myself that I don't micromanage. I allow staff the freedom to carry out their role to the best of ability, and I'd like to think that they think that they're able to do the job that they're set out to do to the best of their ability, with the support that they need when they draw upon it. And that's what I hope that they would say, and I would feel proud if they did say that, because that's certainly what I strive to do.
Well, I'm terrible with deadlines, so it'd be long-term vision for me, definitely. I'd like to be thinking where we would be, you know, where things are going, where they're going to end up.
Some things are very difficult. The survey providers, it's hard to sort of like work to timescales because you're dealing with people. I'm definitely detailed. I will be looking at making sure that we have dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's. I very much like to know what I'm doing. I like clear direction. Yeah, the long-term vision is to, I suppose, keep doing more of what we're doing.
We're obviously being part of a local authority, then we do have really big long-term plans. So you have the long-term 10-year plans, you have 3-year plans, you have 5-year plans. Things tend to develop during the time that we're there. So we'll have a plan about what we're going to do over the next year. But for example, nobody could have envisaged COVID coming along and all the challenges that threw up. And also, for example, we started doing a dementia project, and I didn't have a long-term plan that in year 3 I'm going to set up a dementia project. Those things tend to evolve over time, and then you start to think, well, actually, it would be really useful to have some sort of service that addresses those needs, and then you go off and look at it and set it up. And these things tend to be quite reactive to the needs, local needs in your area.
Slight problem about the titling, I think, there. So this is about the longer term vision for your area and what drives you forward. What was the view of that? And clearly, this is where you're not all the same. This is where leadership becomes very personal. Does anybody want to reflect on their long term view and the impact COVID has had? Because it seriously has on me as a leader, and I expect on many other people. It's mentioned a number of times.
I mean, we've learned a few things from COVID. As Sharon said before, we quickly developed a contact-free adaptation process, and that's now we have to retain that now. So not only COVID, but if somebody's got a deficiency in, i.e. they can catch diseases easily, we can still use that contact-free system. So. And also working from home has become totally embraced by our team, and it helps us retain good people because it gives a freedom for them to, balance life and work.
Kevin, is your service vision imbued by the integrations of health and care, and how you're not going to get squashed by those very big wheels turning?
I'm not going to get squashed by them. I'm just going to shout that housing is here and has a significant part to play. So I think that, it's evolving our direction of travel for sure. That's where I feel the future is, that we need to be embracing our health and social care colleagues. And too often have we been not held in high enough regard, particularly in two-tier authorities. We're just not being at the table, and it's such a huge part. Health and housing is a significant contributing factor, and only now are people starting to realise that. So yeah, I think, DFGs, we need to, they're statutory, they're not going anywhere, but really it's about how can we evolve our systems and our services in line with that wider health and social care picture, not negating that you're a lower tier and you might have different corporate priorities. But yeah, it's a funny old world at the moment. It feels very transitional, and I think it'll be a sort of, well, as ever, it's going to be a state of flux for a while, and then it'll settle down for maybe a month, and then something new restructure will come and put everything back up in the air. But let's see where we are in 24 months. But I'm optimistic.
Sharon, throughout that film, I was really conscious that you and Neil work as a pair absolutely beautifully. And what struck me about it is that even in the visioning stuff, Neil says, I just want the big picture. I just send me the way forward. And you said, I just want to know what I'm doing step by step. And I thought, yeah, do you know what? Between the two of them, they'll get there. Is that how it works?
Yeah, it does. I believe that, you need a good mix of people. So sometimes people are in situations where they just want what's comfortable. They want somebody that thinks the way they think, and they believe that that's what, I suppose because you're working with it, or because you're quite like-minded, you're going to have an easier ride. Whereas I think the opposite, I want to be challenged by somebody who's different. And Neil and I probably couldn't be more different, but it works, So Neil would sort of like, working with Neil, I'm more like, okay, well, yeah, I could take a chance on that, or I could do that. Whereas I'm very detailed, and if it's not in the rule book, then I don't really want to do it. So Neil gets me to step out of my comfort zone. And it works really well together. We do communicate really well. Our officers within our own individual teams, so we've got the same number of officers within our teams, but they can come to Neil to ask a question. His guys come to me to ask a question about an aspect of the grants that I deal with. So the areas that we cover are different. So we're like, Neil always says, we're like two halves of a coin. That's Neil's famous line. But yeah, it works really well. So we do complement the service really well, and yeah, so we get on really well, which is great. We're different, but we respect each other's differences, and I think that's why it works.
Francis,
just agree with me, Neil.
Yeah, totally.
Francis, once you've steadied the ship, what's the course you're setting?
Well, just before we move on to that, I'm really surprised that Neil isn't saying two sides of a record as opposed to two sides of a coin. Look at the background.
Sorry, yeah. A bit of a down cave.
Yeah. I suppose one of our areas of growth as well is the self-funded market, really. We've did about 20 cases last year, about the same the year before. So it's really just acknowledging there's a lot of people out there who need help. People have talked today about removing the means test. We still have that, and that's something we've got to revisit as well. So that's sort of one of many areas, really.
Becky, last word, or shall we move on?
Well, I think I was the same with COVID. We didn't really stop either, but it has taught us quite a lot of things. Like, for example, we're looking at Paperlight at the moment with foundations, trying to get that set up so we can do the forms and things online. We're trying to get a referral form set up so that hospitals can refer directly into our system, which will be really exciting when that's done. Obviously, there's still a bit of a problem with supply issues for some things, which is causing us problems. So that's something that hopefully will get worked through. And we did have a lot of really great things set up with hospitals and GPs before COVID, and that obviously went totally pear-shaped, and we're just having to start rebuild those relationships with hospitals and GPs again now, because now everything's not calmed down completely, but it's getting there. So that's something we'll be really working on again.
Guys, thank you so much for contributing to the discussion this afternoon. And one of the things that really struck me about this is that while there are clear clear similarities in your approach. You're also really different people, and it's really inspiring to see that difference resulting in great outcomes wherever you look. So thank you very much. I have somebody here who can reflect much better on the quality of leadership that people bring to bear